Hi guys, so today we'll be talking about hemolytic uremic syndrome. Now from the name of this disease you can guess that there is hemolysis, that is breakdown of RBCs. There is uremia, that is increase in blood urea levels, which happens when there is any kidney injury, and it's a syndrome, a combination of features which occur together. So hemolytic uremic syndrome is in short called HUS. It is a type of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. So what does this mean? Microangiopathic refers to microangiopathy, meaning small vessel, and this is mainly in the kidneys. This of course some other organ systems are also affected, but mainly there is a disease in the small vessels of the kidneys, which is why there is uremia occurring. Okay. Similar, see, under microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, there's another entity which comes. You may have heard of it, TTP, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. Now, the clinical features in this are quite similar to HUS, but there is a difference in pathogenesis and also the typical age of presentation. Okay, so I'll talk about that later. So, hemolytic uremic syndrome also is a type of hemolytic anemia where there is no intrinsic RBC abnormality. Most of the hemolytic anemias like hereditary spherocytosis, elliptocytosis, sickle cell anemia, there is some defect in the hemoglobin or any G6PD deficiency. There is some defect in the membrane of the RBC. So, but in this, there is no intrinsic RBC or hemoglobin abnormality. It is because of some extrinsic factors. Um, which I'll explain later. So, the basic three characteristics in hemolytic uremic syndrome are, as I told you, hemolytic anemia, also thrombocytopenia, which is reduction in the platelet count in the blood, and acute renal failure. Of course, which is because of the small vessels of the kidney being affected, there might be acute renal failure. Okay. So, what is the basic pathogenesis behind HUS? So first there is endothelial injury, mainly in the small vessels of the kidney, like I told you. What causes this injury? It depends on the type of HUS, which I'll talk about later. So because of the endothelial cell injury, there are a few things which happen. There is exposure of subendothelial collagen. Also, because of this injury, there is release of cytokines, of course, and there is release of a factor called von Willebrand factor, which is involved in platelet aggregation. Now, because of release of von Willebrand factor and exposure of subendothelial collagen, the platelets in the blood will come and attach to the exposed collagen and form a platelet plug. Okay, this platelet plug, and then one more, because of the release of cytokines there is vasoconstriction, and since there's narrowing of the lumen, together this and the platelet plug contribute to microocclusion, meaning occlusion of the small blood vessels, which causes organ ischemia on one hand, and also the platelet plug. Now, Of course, since there are platelets which are spent in creating the platelet plug, there is thrombocytopenia. Also, platelet when there's a platelet plug and there's vasoconstriction and there's almost partial or complete occlusion of the small blood vessel, the RBCs which are passing through the um, blood vessel, they will there is mechanical obstruction to the flow of the blood and the RBCs. So the RBCs will try to squeeze through the blood vessel, because of which there is deformation or uh, breakdown of the RBCs, causing uh, causing hemolysis, which is seen. And if you take a blood smear and observe under the microscope, you will see schistocytes, which are RBCs found in hemolytic anemias because of breakdown of the RBC. So this is the basic etiopathogenesis which occurs, which explains whatever is happening, as a which is the disease presentation. However it presents, it is explained by all these features. I said that endothelial injury is caused by certain factors which depend on the type of HUS it is. So now I'll talk about the types of HUS. There are of two types. One is childhood HUS, which is also called D plus HUS or typical HUS. And you can guess what this is: adult HUS or D minus HUS or atypical HUS. So the reason why childhood HUS is called typical HUS is because HUS is mostly a childhood disease, which is occurring in children less than 5 years mostly. So that is why this is the typical presentation. HUS presenting in a child, it is a typical presentation, but when it presents in adults, it is called atypical HUS, because usually it doesn't present in adults. Also, and D plus D minus, I'll talk about it. So I was talking about endothelial injury. The trigger for endothelial injury in childhood HUS is some infection. Now this infection is either dysentery or pneumonia. Most dysentery is the most common, 90% of the cases in childhood HUS, and 10% in pneumonia. In 10% of the cases there might have been pneumonia which triggered it. Now the reason why I said D plus, you understood. D plus means there is dysentery present, and in adult HUS dysentery is not present, so that is why it is D minus. Alright. And so what happens in this? In dysentery, the dysentery is caused by, the most common organism causing dysentery is E. coli, enterohemorrhagic E. coli. Okay, enterohemorrhagic E. coli, the strain O157H7. So this enterohemorrhagic E. coli, it releases this toxin called Shiga-like toxin or virotoxin, which triggers this endothelial injury. Similarly, like E. coli, which causes dysentery, another organism which causes dysentery is Shigella, which releases Shiga toxin, again which causes the injury. And there's another organism, Streptococcus pneumoniae, releases neuraminidase, again which triggers the endothelial injury in which causes the HUS. So why does it's found that so the reason why HUS in general affects kidney, there is a different reason for childhood and adult. So in childhood HUS, the reason is infection, right? So why it affects kidney mostly is because this Shiga toxin, right? These all most of these toxins, it especially in the enterohemorrhagic E. coli, it has an affinity for a membrane protein called GB3, and this protein is found to be mostly present in renal epithelial or endothelial cells mainly, and also maybe in the brain, the in the vasculature of the brain. So that is why it mostly causes endothelial injury in these areas, and hence it causes HUS. Now we'll go to adult HUS. The trigger for adult is mostly either genetic or sporadic. Now in genetic, there might be some defect in the complement pathway, that is the alternate complement pathway mainly. Now what type of genetic mutation is it which affects the complement pathway? Mainly there is some mutation in factor H, factor I, or factor MCP. Okay, MCP is membrane cofactor protein. So all these three, if you notice, they are these are complement factors which are involved in complement regulation. So all the complement ranging from C1 to C9, everything which is involved in the complement pathway, these three factors mainly are involved in regulation of this complement pathway, meaning they prevent it from getting overactivated, the complement pathway from getting overactivated. But when and also one more mutation in factor B. Now factor B is not a complement regulator, it is a part of the complement pathway itself. So I'll tell you, in these three complement the regulators, if there is a loss of function mutation, meaning the mutation causes this to not be present or not be functional, then the complement pathway will go haywire. See, the reason why endothelial injury, I told you the pathogenesis, but I left out a part. Endothelial injury also causes activation of the complement pathway, which triggers further attraction of phagocytes for engulfing the damaged tissue, and also any foreign organism which has entered the body. So that is activated by the endothelial injury also. But in such cases, in cases like where there is a mutation of these, where complement pathway cannot be regulated, then there is an overactivation of the complement pathway, which, and complement pathway, like I told you, is involved in attracting phagocytes to ingest damaged tissues, as well as, and also complement pathway is involved in inflammation. Now inflammation is supposed to be a good thing for because it leads the way for tissue healing. But if, like, as you know, inflammation in excess is dangerous. So this is what is happening in HUS. Complement pathway getting overactivated is one of the reasons why HUS is happening. So there is a mutation in these, and factor B, which is a part of the complement pathway, there is a gain of function mutation. So again, the complement pathway is overactivated. So the mutation in these are mainly causing. So out of these, the factor H is the commonest, which is causing adult HUS. Alright, and the one factor MCP, membrane cofactor protein, the mutation in this will have the best prognosis, and in factor B, this has the worst prognosis also. Now okay, so genetic is done. Now sporadic HUS is caused because of few things. Either it can be drugs. Now the drugs can be some immunomodulators like cisplatin, gemcitabine, also tacrolimus, cyclosporin, clopidogrel, etc. So such drugs can also cause HUS, maybe because of endothelial injury. Also it can be caused due to SLE or pregnancy. or post bone marrow transplant. So these are all possibly causes of adult HUS. Okay, so now that we have talked about types of HUS, now we'll move on to clinical features. Before that, one thing which I forgot to mention was I said why Shiga, the infection, the childhood HUS, why that is more, why kidney is more prone to that, but I didn't mention about adult. In adult, the it is found that, see, in adult the main problem is complement. The some from problem the complement pathway. Now usually these problems in the complement pathway are observed to be affecting the kidney more. So kidney seems to be seems to be extra sensitive to any problems in the complement pathway. So the reason is not exactly elicited, but the kidney seems to be susceptible to injury by complement pathway. So the clinical features in this, it again differs from in case of childhood. The main features remain the same, but the beginning of how it begins, since in childhood HUS there's an infection. Usually there is, like I told you, dysentery or pneumonia, but dysentery with vomiting, nausea, any fever. So it begins like this. There is a history. This a patient presenting with HUS will give a history of such symptoms around. Bef- uh, there's a after this disease occurs. There's an incubation period of 1 to 4 weeks, after which HUS manifests. So they will give around 1 to 4 weeks back. They'll give a history of dysentery, vomiting, or possibly some pneumonia. So you can suspect that that has been a trigger for HUS. While in case of adult, since it's a there's a genetic uh, defect, there's a inherited defect, there's a genetic mutation which is causing the adult HUS. So why has it not manifested? Now when the body is normally healthy, there is no, of course there is no manifestation as such. I mean, complement pathway is not active, so of course the defect will not be known. Now when there is some external trigger or some infection or something like that, which can cause endothelial injury, such an infection, it will trigger this, and it will bring this this complement regulated deficiency to the front. So only then we'll come to know. So mostly after a trigger, some infection or something, or as in sporadic, like I said, drugs, pregnancy, or some post bone marrow transplant or SLE, in such cases that forms a trigger. So that is, there's a history of that. uh, then I told you the three main features. There is there is a hemolytic anemia, of course. So anemia, in any anemia there is fatigue, dyspnea, pallor is seen, and the person appears also very pale. And there is jaundice in this because it is hemolytic anemia. So of course there is increase in indirect bilirubin in the blood, and there is also jaundice. Then I told you there is thrombocytopenia, right? So the manifestations of thrombocytopenia, it's very simple. So, there is petechiae, purpura, some mucosal bleeding might be present, and after some minor cuts there might be some bleeding. So that and all points to thrombocytopenia. And the last one, impaired renal function, since it mainly affects the kidney. See, it can also affect there is a, okay, first, impaired renal function, hematuria, there might be hematuria, proteinuria found, oliguria, or anuria, depending on the severity. In If there is acute kidney injury, or there's it progresses to end stage renal disease or something, there might be anuria. So what I was talking about was, um, now with I mentioned before that there's a similar entity called TTP, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, which is similar to HUS in case of clinical features, but there's a difference in pathogenesis. How? Uh, in in such in thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, there is a mostly what is found is it's similar, the pathogenesis is a little similar to adult HUS, where there is a genetic defect. So similarly in TTP there is a genetic defect in this enzyme, which is ADAM TS13, okay, which is also called von Willebrand factor cleavage protein. It's an enzyme, it's a metalloprotease which cleaves von Willebrand factor, okay. uh, so if there's any defect in this gene, then von Willebrand factor will not be cleaved. There will be large polymers of von Willebrand factor. So essentially, and when I told you before that von Willebrand factor causes aggregation of platelets. Now, if von Willebrand factor is not broken down by ADAM TS13, then it will the polymers of one Willebrand factor will keep growing, and it will keep accumulating and keep aggregating platelets. So again, that is causing microocclusion, that is causing microangiopathic hemolytic anemia and all that. So this is this, and the pathogenesis is slightly different, of course, from HUS. Right, yeah. So this. So moving on to investigations which are done in this case. Now we should do a complete blood count or hematology. Of course, like I said, the platelet count is reduced. There might be some increase in WBC count. That might be because in case of infection, probably. And also because there is inflammation, so of course there is attraction of the phagocytes to the area where the cytokines and all the inflammatory mediators are released, so there is an increase in WBCs possibly. Also there is fall in the hemoglobin because this hemolytic anemia. There is also, of course, RBCs, the number of RBCs, but the number of reticulocytes increase because there is breakdown of RBCs, so more uh, RBCs are being synthesized in the bone marrow, so some reticulocytes are increased in the blood, of course. This is suggestive of very active um, replication and formation of RBCs in the bone marrow, so this is what it indicates, as you know. And also one more thing, hemo see there is see, when there's hemolytic anemia, hemoglobin is released into the blood, but there is a hemoglobin can cause a lot of harm to the body. It can cause some organ dysfunction if it is present freely. That is why there's a protein called haptoglobin which binds to the hemoglobin, right, and prevents it from acting on other organs or causing organ damage. This because of so in usually in hemolytic anemia, when the hemoglobin levels when there's free hemoglobin, haptoglobin binds to that, so also haptoglobin levels reduce because of increased hemolysis, increased free hemoglobin, and haptoglobin binding to that, so there's low haptoglobin also. But one thing which you should know, the PT and APTT, right? Now this is essentially, there might be some platelet reduction in the number of platelets, but there is no there's nothing to do with coagulation cascade here or the coagulation factors, nothing. So these will remain normal mostly, or they may be uh, slightly elevated. the time, the prothrombin time or APTT, right? But mostly they are normal. Also, one important thing to remember is there's a negative Coombs test. This is very important because it suggests there is no autoimmune basis for this. So there is a negative Coombs test. Also, which I mentioned before, in the blood smear, there is a large number of schistocytes, that is deformed or broken down RBCs. Okay. Now, in one more important thing, in the serum, if you look at the serum biochemistry, since it is a hemolytic anemia, as you know, there is increased LDH levels, there is increased indirect bilirubin, which causes the jaundice. Also, in the serum, when you measure the blood urea nitrogen, the creatinine, both are elevated because there is renal impairment of the renal function. Also, for this one more important thing that must be done is urine analysis. In this, I told you, right, because kidney is affected, there is hematuria or proteinuria, which can be found in the urine. Now, briefly about complications which can happen. The one main first which we must talk about is in the kidney, that is, it causes hypertension. And hypertension has been found to be in infants which are less than 12 months of age. Around 7% of the infants affected by HUs have been found to have hypertension, but in general also it can HUS can cause hypertension in other cases. There might be chronic kidney disease. Also, it might become so severe that it can lead to end stage renal disease. So in kidney, these are the complications. Now, the next organ system which is most likely to be affected is CNS. So there might be seizures, coma, stroke, paralysis. So of course, stroke causing paralysis also. These can be some complications which are which can happen in the CNS. Also, then in GI, there can be hemorrhagic colitis, mostly happening in those cases of E. coli infection, which cause HUS. Bowel necrosis, perforation, peritonitis can happen. Intussusception can also happen as a complication. Okay. Then in the heart, there might be some complications. See, this is a microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, this disorder. So it can affect any of the organs, mostly the kidney, but it can affect anything. There might be ischemia and this cardiac failure, which causes fluid overload. Then even pancreas and liver can be affected. So there might be some pancreas being affected can cause diabetes mellitus. Liver being affected can cause hepatomegaly. Those AST, ALT levels might be temporarily elevated. These are some complications which can happen with HUS. So finally, the treatment. Now, especially for childhood, see, childhood HOS is caused by a single episode of infection in which the toxin binds and causes endothelial injury and all that. So in childhood HOS, actually nothing needs to be done. There's conservative management mainly. Bed rest, saline should be given, of course, because there is a kidney injury, so saline must be given. there is no role for antibiotics. Remember, this is not, the infection has already gone. It's the toxin which is affecting. It's the toxin which is causing the endothelial injury. So there's no role of antibiotics. So it's mainly conservative management. For adult HUS, since see in adults the there is a deficiency in the complement regulators. That is this is genetic defect. So mainly what is done by plasmapheresis. Here the plasma, the liquid component of the blood, the plasma is extracted out, and it is uh, uh, the it is treated, and it is sent back to the body. So in this case, of course, the complement regulators are added to the plasma. Whatever is needed to be usually in plasmapheresis, if there is any harmful product in general, any harmful product, it's removed. This is all extracorporeal which is happening outside the body. The plasma, the harmful products are removed, and some deficient products are added. So in this case, the complement regulator, that the deficiency which is there, the complement regulators are added to the plasma, and it is sent back to the body. So it will prevent the overactivation of the complement system, and hence it will reduce the symptoms. This is one modality. For factor H, it is found that steroids are helpful. Now, the most effective right now is found to be monoclonal antibodies, like especially eculizumab or ravalizumab. This is a modified version of eculizumab, a little better version. Now this both of them are anti C5 complement inhibitor. So C5 complement protein is involved in the formation of the membrane, uh, the MAC, that complex in which C5, a subunit of C5, C6, C7, C8, and C9 are together forming that complex, which is helping in destruction of the damaged cells and the microbes, and also yeah, so that is basically the complement path. C5 is getting overactivated in the complement pathway, right? So eculizumab is an anti C5 complement. It's a C5 complement inhibitor, so it will prevent the formation of that complex, and hence it will prevent the activity, the complement pathway which is overactivated, which has caused the symptoms. It will prevent that by with this. Also rituximab, in cases where there is autoantibodies produced. This is a CD20 inhibitor. So CD20 which is present on B cells, not on plasma cells, the uh, B cells, which are formed before, which are present before any infection is present. Infection causes a conversion of B cells to plasma cells, which are specific to the infection. So B cells, this is the CD20 is found on B cells. So rituximab will inhibit the B cells, and this is usually in cases of autoimmune, in cases of auto antibodies which are produced to prevent that. But mostly it is eculizumab or ravalizumab, which are anti C5 complement inhibitors, which are found to be very effective, more effective than plasmapheresis. Plasmapheresis is not always effective, and it has its own complications, but this has found to be effective immediately when given, or even after, if suppose there has been a chronic kidney disease or ESRD in which kidney transplant has to be done. So after the kidney transplant, if there is a recurrence of HUS which is happening, this is very effective in that case. So in this is mainly in adult HUS. So in adult HUS, the manifestations occur only when there is a trigger. So after it is treated, there can be complete remission, but again it can recur because of the same trigger or some other trigger which is causing endothelial injury. So eculizumab it's better to continue this indefinitely in the lifetime, because you can't exactly prevent triggers from uh, coming. So eculizumab will prevent the overactivation of the complement, so you have to take it throughout the lifetime. um, yeah, and it is found to be most effective in uh, the mutation in the factor MCP, membrane uh, core protein. So in that, it is found to be the most effective, that is the one with the best prognosis, right? So here, this is found to be the most effective in that. So these are the basic treatment modalities which are present in hemolytic uremic syndrome. Thank you.